Hello there, everyone. As we all know, it's quite common to reach a space in life, especially in spiritual practice, where you feel pretty much in alignment. Where you're thinking positive thoughts, you feel as if it's easy to transcend the things you're going through. It's easy to keep positive focus as you move through your life and feel the sort of inner sense of stability and calm. And then, as if out of the blue, you're knocked back to square one. You're struggling again. You're dealing with all those petty issues again. Those things you thought you had already dealt with are back up in your face. Today I'm going to tell you exactly why you have that perception, and why it's inaccurate to ever believe that it's possible for you to go back to square one. It is not possible to move backwards in this universe. So why do you have this perception? And how is it inaccurate? And how can we better look at it when we experience this way of being, where 1 minute we're in a space of alignment, and the next we're back to square one? I'm going to use this poster board to explain to you how it is that this works, this perception. You in the physical dimension experience things according to a linear timeline with past and future. And you think of things in terms of a scale. So let's draw this little ladder. Down here you could consider this low vibrations. Up here you could consider this high vibrations. Again, this is not a perception which the universe at large holds, because there's no such thing to the universe perspective as low and high. That is a perception which begins to occur the minute you enter the third dimensional awareness. So here you are in your life. Things are going pretty good. Things are starting to improve. So you perceive yourself climbing this scale. Now here's the issue. When you run back into problems, you perceive yourself falling back down the ladder, down the scale. So you perceive your life in this sort of ebb and flow of climbing up the ladder, falling back down the ladder, when this is not actually what is happening. And this perception is what's getting you into trouble in terms of making you feel crappy about yourself, because you can't maintain that super high vibration you all want to maintain. So let's take a look at how the universe sees this process. Energy moves in a spiral motion. So from Source's perspective, your linear timeline is seen as a spiral, which is only ever expanding. You can't ever go backwards in the spiral. The spiral is only ever moving outwards. So let's draw this spiral and pretend that this spiral is absolutely infinite, because we're mirroring the concept of universal eternal expansion. So this spiral continues to keep on going. It's only ever moving outwards. Now if we apply your linear timeline from your third dimensional perspective to the universe's quote-unquote timeline, it doesn't see it as time, but this perception of expansion, then you can see how as you climb the scale and continue to move along this timeline from past to future, you see how this is the same kind of scale. So here's where things get really, really interesting. When you start to experience in your life going back to square one or slipping backward, what's actually happening is that you're reaching a state of improvement, and then you're running into the same issue again, reaching a state of improvement relative to the same situation, and then reaching new levels of that same experience again. And so when you hit these spots where your linear timeline interjects with the spiral timeline of Source perspective, you feel as if you are sliding back down the ladder, when that's not what's happening at all. So if I turn this sideways, you can see how it's only ever possible for you to increase your frequency. And when you are experiencing these decreases in vibration, you're experiencing the I'm back in the fray, I'm having the same sort of problem that I had before again, what's really happening is that you're running into new opportunities to purify that vibration to an even higher state of being. So let's call these intersecting points the contrast. As you can see, It is only ever possible for you to increase your vibration relative to any subject. It is not possible to decrease your vibration relative to these subjects when it comes to universal expansion. So let's assume that we're starting at this point where you come to the awareness that you have an issue with codependent relationships. Just having that awareness is enough to change the vibratory frequency, enough to make you a match to different experiences. And so you see this improvement right here. This, let's just call this the improvement. You feel the improvement. But that improvement is a new vibratory set point. It's a new place from which expansion will occur. And every time you reach a new perspective, it gives rise to new contrast. So let's call this point the contrast point. And you will feel as if, oh no, I've slid back into those problems I had with codependent relationships, when that's not what's happened at all. Once you had improved your vibratory rate relative to codependent relationships, you reached a new point of perspective, but it wasn't healed completely. So this contrast comes in order to inspire you to new heights of improvement relative to the codependent relationships. So right here, maybe I have the awareness that I have a codependent relationship. And right here, my relationships are getting a little bit better because I'm realizing that I have that pattern. But right here, I meet a new person and I fall back into this idea of a codependent relationship. Do you hear those words, fall back? That's not actually what happened. But what did happen is that my reality began to mirror to me vibrations which still existed within me and my being. And they manifested physically. And the reason they manifested physically is so that I could have the opportunity to heal them to an even further degree. So here you'll see another sort of improvement until you reach another contrast point where there's the opportunity, you've gone quote-unquote back into, we would call it forward into, deeper levels of codependent awareness. And then you found improvement from that state of codependency, and maybe you find yourself up here, if we're past this contrast point, i.e. you pay attention to what isn't wanted, and maybe you focus on what you want instead and actually line up with a non-codependent relationship. Let's say here you experience your first not codependent relationship. And that's the first time you were ever able to manifest a physical reflection of your current vibration, which vibrates more to frequency of open, free relationships than codependent relationships. But as you notice, the way that it feels to us here is that every time we hit these contrast points, we're slipping back down the vibrational ladder. That's not happening at all, which is why I want you to see this diagram of your linear timeline compared to the expansive, expanding timeline of the universe. Because it will become obvious to you that all that is happening here is kind of a peeling away of the layers of the onion. Let's consider codependency a total onion, and there's multiple layers to that onion, and only when you reach no more layers is that particular issue no longer a vibratory frequency, which is part of your reality. But it's like every time you're peeling back the onion layer, you're feeling like you're back at square one. But if you were to zoom out a bit and see the way that this works, it's just that you're peeling each layer successively off until there is no more left. So this is the process of expansion. So I'm going to tell you a secret. Healing happens in layers. And anytime you're convinced that you are over and done with something, that you've already overcome something, that's your indication that you haven't. If we are convinced that we are done with something, if we feel the need to be done with something, we have resistance to not being done with something, and so anything you resist persists, you are not done with it. So the way that you know if you're done with something is if you no longer care. You might even enjoy it coming back over and over again. Why? Because you know what comes of this process of expansion. You know that each time you hit one of these contrast points, it offers you a new opportunity for even higher levels of purification, higher levels of vibratory frequency, which weren't available to you before this contrast entered your experience. Once you start seeing the universe in this way, you will no longer have resistance to things cropping up again. It's not going to matter whether I'm done with my codependent relationship issue. Why? Because if I run into that issue again, How sweet is the relationship that's waiting for me on the other side? It is common to feel as if you're slipping back into old patterns, but we must accept the universal truth that this is not the case, because it is impossible in a universe like this to go backwards. The universe is only ever continually expanding. So what has really happened is that you have entered a new cycle where new levels of healing are possible, even if those new levels of healing are relative to a subject which you have encountered before. A good way to think of this is to think of climbing Mount Everest. Let's pretend we live in the world where it is not possible for you to fall down the mountain while you're climbing that mountain. It's not possible. It is true that this mountain is very tall, but you climbed the first summit, and when you get to the first summit, you feel accomplished. But once you are at the first summit, higher levels of this mountain are available to you, and so you climb, and the difficulty of climbing makes you feel like you're back at the bottom of the hill again, climbing to the first summit again. But this is not the case. That process is simply the necessary conditions to help you reach the second summit. No matter how much this process reminds you of the climb from the base of the mountain to the first summit, you are not climbing from the base of the mountain to the first summit. You can never do that climb again. Repeating something does not serve universal expansion. The only thing that serves universal expansion is doing something different from here forward based on something you have previously done. And so what's really happening is that you are moving from first summit to second summit. This here is really good news. What it means is that relapses are impossible. The idea that you can relapse, fall back into old patterns, or go back to square one is an illusion, which is only a part of your third dimensional awareness. If you zoom out and you look at expansion according to universe's perspective, you will see that what is ever only happening is you moving into higher and higher levels of vibratory frequency. And the thing which is inspiring you to those new levels of vibratory frequency is contrast. So even if you experience that which is unwanted, even if you experience what you identify as a lowered vibratory rate, all that is new necessary conditions to inspire what more you are meant to become in this life relative to any subject in your life currently or in your life in the future. So think about this next time you feel like you've gone backwards, because it isn't ever the case. Have a good week.